Split 1 ALGS playoffs, and we have one more map left to go here on Storm Point. Could not be more excited. We got Crazy Raccoon, map number 1, Serenity, map number 2. Who is taking map 3, Dia?
I wouldn't have predicted either of those squads to take map 1 or 2. So who's a squad that I wouldn't have predicted to take map 3 either? I probably wouldn't have predicted Omit to take a map in the first 3. So I'm going to go for Omit for map 3. And if the trend continues, I'll be right. And if not, well, at least everybody heard my logic.
Hear me out. Omit, they have this effect about them. And when they locked in Omit as that org via the acquisition, right? Omit acquired Electrify Steel Gaming, and now they're known as Omit. The moment that name change came in was where we started to see an amp up from that roster. And I have just got to say, I think he might be onto something. Lufka has plenty of LAN experience, most notoriously known for his time competing on Ascend, but then you also have Light and Blast.
Yeah, and Light actually statistically has been really good in EMEA Pro League. I think has the, I'm gonna check, 4th highest DPS in the region. Being top 4 in anything is gonna be really good and has really impressed. I think the problem that I was anticipating out of Omit moving into LAN is that they really skirt the line between a team that plays for hard zone. They're not like a Made in Heaven that really hard sends zone and then just wins from there. And they also don't prioritize God Spot very often when rotating in from the edge. They often are, you know, moving it along with everyone else. If they end up in a good spot, they end up in a good spot, but they're not really going after these game wins with nearly as much intention as you'll see from other squads. So I'd be surprised to see it, but my expectations have been defied so far. Let's see what gets changed up as we drop into our first set of contests.
And with the lane line here favoring the northern side of the map, that contest at wall just starts throwing down, and Dexter using that Prowler to take down not one, but 2 members of Serenity, your map 2 winners. This is a complete different dynamic, but TYK, they need this considering where they have fallen on top of that series leaderboard.
Just watching, like, who does that? Who just takes down 2 people with a breath? That was Dexter. My metaphorical hat is tipped to you. TYK take probably the fastest contest that we've seen from them so far, but Disguised poked their heads in just a bit. Yugi hanging out for now, will unfortunately be full thirsted. And I feel like we've got just a little bit of a look from Disguised to see if they can pick up KP, but they shouldn't really be going for it.
No. Can we talk about Disguise for a second? Because it's only Timmy and Design that have extended out to get into the wall mix. There is still a player, enemy, back at North Pad, ready to make things happen for them. But for now, you mentioned they're not necessarily going to commit too much to that third party. And for now, one member of Serenity still stands. But we have to turn our sights over to what potentially happened for the checkpoint contest.
That's very true. Checkpoint contest has gone largely unnoticed so far, and it's because, well, it didn't happen. NTC dropped down in the hot dog buildings. I will remind everyone at home, or those that are unfamiliar, this is not a POI. This is not a place you want to drop, because it doesn't come with a lot of loot. But NTC's odds of surviving here, clearly better than they were in Checkpoint, at least to their own calculations. It will mean that both teams get to play a, in air quotes, regular game of Apex Legends, but I will say with NTC as close to Disguised as there are, I'm going to put a limit on how regular it's going to be.
Well, we get a good look at where that zone's starting to pull. It's going to favor your map 1 winners, Crazy Raccoon, who land in Command Center. We've seen them take a game that ended in Barometer that favored a little rotation. Now let's see how they fare off trying to defend that home turf. Red Rams in Lightning Rod will likely start positioning themselves towards that area where the zones kind of overlap on that northeastern side. But for all of our squads that have that hefty rotation of going from the further southern points that are that ultimate low ground of the map as a whole, it's never fun to rotate from south to north.
Well, and that's one of the benefits that LG has. I mean, we talked about Red Rams who land at Lightning Rod. From Zeus Station, it's basically the same thing. You play out of the high ground, and LG never want to be fighting uphill into anyone. So it's interesting that they've put themselves in this building. They're predicting, of course, that it'll pull over towards this area, and for a ring one like this, I dare say it's not a really bad guess, because it can't end up on the high ground in the mountains, and so most of the zone is excluded from possibility.
Cloud9 on their rotation. They're taking so much damage. They actually grab a knock onto Naughty from afar. Dexter, man, just making it all happen.
They're gonna go for it. They're like 50-50. Asia's like, do I, don't I? I think at this point the call is kind of don't I. C9's reset going off on the other side leaves them just fine. I mean, the Trident rotation getting stopped is mildly irritating, but C9 we're gonna have to get off pretty fast anyways, because going through wall in a Trident just is not a real strategy. They're gonna walk their way through here, and they're going to get back in the Trident. They gotta go around wall now, surely.
Surely, but not done here for TYK. Yes, they weren't able to get that elimination, but we still have more squads making the push in, and Asia cracks 2 before falling. Now all falls onto Dexter and Zicky. Jen Burton will fall in.
Dexter's down.
Zero, man. Zero has to finish this off.
Still has Beast the Hunt ticking for a little while longer. Zero's going to abandon this. Not gonna try and clutch up, not gonna fight onto the high ground. 5 seconds left, and turning around for now. Maybe we go for a soft reset, but there's already a man advantage on the other side, and it feels like Dark Zero just decided this is scuffed and would rather literally play it out as one person than go for the win in that fight.
I was curious if he was waiting for Sykes to try and crawl to some semblance of cover that he could work with, maybe get Sykes back on their feet. He grabbed the tack cooldown on the scan, so we could play a little bit with the Nox, gas traps, and the scan. But TYK, they hit the Evo swap, manifest themselves onto purple, and keep moving. But for 2R1C, the only other lifeline in the lobby is going to be Micey. They have found themselves into Stormcatcher, but for now, this is going to be a very savory position for a lot of our squads that are still coming out of the southern side.
This is the 2R1C that I wanted to see.
Rats with one controller.
Win fights.
Fucking amazing.
As Dark Zero does go down, I think we'll be reminded of how quick, or how important it is to take quick fights, and 2R1C's composition truly is built around that. You don't see crypto lifeline every day, and there's a pretty good reason for that. It's honestly not a great combination from the majority of teams, but 2R1C's game plan is pretty binary. If they see a team, they want to fight them, they press EMP and run at their faces. And that's something that Uchako and Micey have really worked well with Yark on.
Let's see what Kinotrope's able to do, working their way down the hill. They deal the finishing blow over towards Oxygen Esports. Now, mind you, we still have 18 squads left. DZ and Oxygen are the first 2 squads to hit back to the lobby, forced to watch the last map on Stormpoint for this series play out. For One Tappy, Miyake, Arufa, their journey's just beginning. We've already taken into the top 10, but that's not going to be enough for them. We're still trying to have that great solid game to really shoot themselves up the leaderboard into the top 3. Now, landing in Launchpad, we've already made our way just a little further north than we would have liked. We still have a while to go, and for LG, MDY, White, a lot of these teams that are kind of playing around that area, it's tough to get up there, to close that gap, the distance, especially when you're looking downhill in all these open spaces.
One of the most important things about a ring like this that's pulling up towards where we saw LG earlier in the Stormcatcher Thunderwatch, may Thunderwatch rest in peace area, is your use of evac towers and when that happens, because they're some of your, they're one of your only tools to really access height. Virtus Pro, with a great strat here, do manage to keep a lot of that resource management game at bay, and they trade health for an evac tower. They say, we'd rather use meds, we'd rather tank zone, than use an evac to try and get up to the height. And I can't say that I fault them for it. It puts them in a good position to take perhaps the roof of former Thunderwatch and maybe even turn that into a couple more kills.
I'm very curious to see how this plays out. They are so mindful here, and elsewhere you see Navi's name out to the furthest right that could possibly happen. They went on one of the longest rotations outside of the circle to get to where Virtus Pro has positioned themselves. And I'm not sure if they're aware, and when I look at the kill feed and see Sharky go down, it just seems as if they were able to catch one of them off guard.
doing the same play, and Virtus Pro, as you say, definitely got caught off guard. It's tough to see them use the evac tower they tried so hard to avoid using, only to go down. Navi inherit this potential now. It's likely that they also choose to prioritize the high ground. They can take a fight, but Navi's focus should be on getting the Roof of Thunder watch and playing from there. There is a big threat, however. Any team that's coming from height off of Command Center up to the north, they're going to pose a really big problem to any squad that's trying to play low ground.
Cloud9 fallen to Red Rams, and this is the attention that we were looking at. Omit picking up Red Rams, finding that KP. Look, your prediction might not have been so bad after all, because they found themselves in a very solid spot towards this next zone. But I'm very worried about our squads trying to come out of this corner of the circle. Now, Disguise, they've been showing their fighting prowess. It's been great, but we need to see them make it through that endgame, and this is the perfect zone for them.
Just a little while longer for TYK. They haven't had to move yet, which have transitioned from playing a very central area, picking up kills from the teams that pass by them, to now moving into the edge, where yes, they'll be lacking a little bit of information, but they absolutely have the KP to feel comfortable gambling with their lives, playing for the win. 5 kills so far, and with Geared being the squad to rotate by them, Geared with a member on 1 HP. Asia does so much damage to 2, but ultimately goes down. Dexter so far away. This could be it for TYK. They've made a critical positioning error.
The full comes in, and now Asia will be left into the lobby of the death box, and we pop the piece of the hunt. We hit the sweep onto goodbye, Village, but job's not done. Ziggy's got a PK. Going down, Retta. Yes, Panic grabs the trade, but at the end of the day, TYK will fall. Geared survive, despite it looking very scary.
They're going to be taken out by Liquid Alienware. Last member being chased down now is Geared. Will ultimately fall. Panic, the last member. But what a clutch from Panic to take it up against TYK. TYK have been on such a warpath in this game, in game number 3, that you've got to respect any squad that's able to take them down, and especially seeing Panic clutch it up. It does make me smile. Panic's one of the youngest and also one of the most talented players coming out of South America. He's only 18 years old, but is incredible on the controller. Very much proving it right there. Unfortunately, doesn't get to move it into the next ring. Liquid Alienware inherit the spot. They've got the survey beacon. They've got all the information on teams ahead of them. Let's see what they can do.
For Timmy and Enemy now working in tangent here, taking down the remnants of Never to Change and hitting the quick reset. You see where that zone is pulling, and look at where they need to go. We've got a couple chokes to try and filter through. It's like, which one is going to be our best course of action? Now, for those of you who may have forgotten, Crazy Raccoon is still in this lobby. They land in Command Center, and look at the space that they have taken for themselves. They have one member of the squad that is really looking northbound, holding that point from Disguised and Omit. But when you're about to get hit from all fronts, I'm very nervous that Liquid Alienware on their rotation will really throw it down.
You know what's the perfect way to contextualize this? You remember the last game of Champs, where it was Startify TSM, and ultimately the drop down off the high ground changed everything, but there was a lot of high ground in off of the Command Center drop. It's the same area that Crazy Raccoon have. In fact, this appears to be almost exactly the same ring. 2R1C fly in on the grav cannon, actually do so pretty darn well. They're not going to be focused as so many squads are already sat in Thunderwatch.
Now LG, they called it, right? They were one of the first teams to make their way into Thunderwatch, and as that zone starts to favor that POI, all of these teams are going to start collapsing around each other. Na'Vi, the team that made that furthermost eastern rotation to really surprise the VP squad, but they're just all collapsing on each other. But for the squads that are running Conduit and have that Radiant transfer available to them, if we can start connecting some of these Amp Sentinel shots to whittle away at the health, it'll allow them just a moment of time to further the journey out. Now granted, they're still in this zone for the time being, but we've invested so much. The black hole comes down, and the Arcstar barrage to try and do as much as they can. Timmy falls, but Enemy picks up another.
This could be it. Designful could clutch this right now. Charge Sentinel comes out. Crazy Raccoon go down, and DSG win the fight for Tiff, one of the best spots in the game. Uncontestable high ground now for Disguised.
But it's not done, right? Because we've got this squad that's traversing the topography of Stormpoint through the caves, have the Trident, which is going to provide a bit of that audio cue that now we know, looking down on, that will be available for them. And it's tough, right? We're shooting out the traps, we're making our presence known. They're going to have to worry about the squad that wants to drop down from high ground, and I'm a little nervous. Oh, hey, Karambe, let's go.
Will it be Reject or will it be DSG with a thirst on Disguised? It looks like Reject are the ones that'll actually be coming off the high ground. Will actually be, I think in the words of Onset, no, it was Gaskin coming down from the heavens. That appears to be Reject in this case. Disguised don't have a lot of options to fight this out anymore. They're already evacing away. You can see them in the sky above Liquid Alienware. It's the last two members of Disguised heading to the hills.
No, one didn't make it out. One did not get it on the evac. So we just see Disguised fall apart from Lufka, from Sungjun, and they will be done and dusted down to the final 9. Now, this omit pick that you had and the omit effect we were talking about, if there's one person I know that's very familiar with Thunderwatch endings, it's going to be Lufka.
You're right, you're right, you're right. Man, this is tough. Omit are going to have to absorb the push. It'll probably be Reject the jump on them. That's what I'd be guessing, if anything, for now. Now, the other opportunity is that everybody leaves Omit alone, and I do think that's a better situation for literally everyone involved. Omit benefit, so do Liquid and Reject, because Omit's unlikely to commit to the low ground if either of them fight. But if somebody takes a fight on Omit on high ground, that's getting third party. Focusing on the low ground, however, Tropes are starting to make their way into zone, and they are getting cut short in a big way.
And it's a Rufa. Last standing for this squad at this point in time. When you see both of your squad mates, we do have the mobile respawn beacon available to them, but I don't think that there is any way we're recovering that banner, especially when they know exactly where Arufa went, and it's just a matter of time before Aurora are able to take down the rest of them if the ring doesn't do it first.
Hasta la vista, baby. Trope go down. Aurora make their way to top 8. Not a lot of kills for Aurora so far, but as 2R1C fall, the placements just get better. And Aurora keep dialing in. They've got the next zone coming to them. Tiff, this is exactly the zone we talked about. The pulling just north of Thunderwatch. The drop down from height is going to mean everything, as will control of Lightning Rod.
Look, Hardeki already whittling down towards Navi, and also Impulse focusing on Luminosity. Some of these squads that have been here prior, and since a large majority walking in from Zeus. Now it's just everyone falling apart, and it's Yanya, Niezul, they're taking down Omit. Omit not going to be able to rotate towards that next area. But for Aurora, they have sent out their next target. It's going to be following Luminosity, who are trying to get into that next zone.
We called this out earlier, but when Liquid Alienware take a fight onto Omit, surely there's a third party coming in after that. The low ground is exploding into chaos as Oirain takes down Funk. Aurora will take a short reset. They've already used Beast of the Hunt. They do not have this critical cooldown, and that is hamstringing their capabilities. Well, up on the height, this fight really does kick off, and Liquid Alienware have already lost two. Yanya tries to survive in the smoke and will do so for a little while, but it's temporary. Tip. Liquid Alienware have a limit on time.
Speaking of that, Luminosity does as well. They will fall, and now Yanya forced to play as a solo. And you can just hear all the audio cues around him, the feet shuffling. You're just like, please do not look over here. Just let me be. We were talking about legacies and wanting to create them, and you know, that's tough.
Teams have ignored Reject Winity's path into this game, however, and from the north, they have one of the best positions. Virtus Pro on low ground does only duel have such a limited ability to access this game, to influence it in any real way. It's Reject, who again are being ignored, that are likely going to come out on top of all this.
Nineveh, he's got 5 eliminations, 8 for the total squad. They clean up Navi, but this is where it's going to get tough. We have 4 squads remaining. Liquid Alienware's Yanya, the solo. Virtus Pro looks to be on the right side. Now, to try
Lifeline
and
is down
find.
first.
That is always going to be a tough spot, right? But Nine Impulse does have potentially a smoke, but they're focusing on healing themselves up, maybe waiting for those to lock in behind the supply crate. But Yanya is going to be able to poke and prod, put damage on it, but then you've got the squad on the north, Reject, who just has lines of sight galore.
Reject, they know what's going on. There are drops on both sides. Aurora have to go for the reset. Ignore Reject. And I cannot believe they get this res off. Reject have taken so long to actually take space. And with Zhangzhu now on the side, they're going to have to create a team fight out of nowhere. Aurora have reset.
Yeah, but Reject's the same squad at map number 2 that leaves their building to take an engagement, but Obley opens it up, throws it down, cleans
What
up
the
Aurora
fuck,
in a
man?
blink of an eye, and they do it.
Underestimating Reject. To quote Obley himself, "You will regret." That was an incredible way to close out the game. Not because, importantly, Tim, not because of the actual end game finish. The last 3v3, it was okay. Actually, Reject made some pretty critical errors on timing. But what happened was all before that. What really determined the course of the game was when they were able to move on to hype. When Liquid Alienware took the fight on Omid, saying, you know what, we can take whoever third party them. And they couldn't take it because it was Reject.
They needed to do exactly that. Ahead of this playoffs, I had to ask some questions over to Reject to hear what they had changed post-champs to now for the playoffs. And a lot of that came with Obley prior felt pressured to not only perform with those eliminations, but stay on the top of his game as that IGL, micromanaging a lot. But that's where, you know, you've got that teammate, Songjun, to make a lot of those other important calls, to relieve Obley from that pressure of feeling like you have to do everything. And when you have a trio that you trust, and we already highlighted with Wig and Greek interviewing Karampe, they have that duo-ship. So really creating that trio and showing out in groups. Now granted, it's just the start, but this is where you start fleshing some things out and you know what works and being adaptable, being aggressive and getting that. But I'm really curious to hear what the desk's got to say about it. So Glitter, you tell us.
Thanks so much, Tiff and Dia. Fantastic job on those first 3 matches here of this series. And we knew groups were going to be chaotic. A lot of the teams that we actually spoke about did well. Some, on the flip side, not. Let's dive into it. Okay, first of all, closing out the day, Hodzic, you had mentioned them. Reject Winity coming out on top.
No, absolutely. I mean, that was a really good showing. As Dia pretty much mentioned, they won that game the second they took Team Liquid out from the high ground there as they were trying to push onto a mid. So huge awareness to realize that that is the game-winning spot, and that's the spot that they need to play for. So great job by Reject. It did seem like they kind of mistimed that push a little bit on the end, but the important thing is they were controlling most of the zone. So they didn't have to necessarily make the first move unless they had a really big opening, in which they did. But a little bit of mistime on that last push, but still well played overall.
Yeah, I mean, really solid performance, at least to start off the series. Now we're obviously going to be switching maps in just a little bit here, but at least those first 3 Storm Point matches are out of the way and people are feeling really confident. Speaking about some of these other squads who also had a strong performance, we did see some moments there out of Liquid Alienware, and that was a squad that you had mentioned as well, Zephyr.
It has been kind of a slower start here, but
Yeah.
being the best North American team to come out at least right now in Groups A versus B, we finally saw signs that showed a bit of the life there, especially in our most recent game. Granted, we expect a little bit more from this roster, especially when it does come to some of those 3v3 situations, but ultimately, in the end, they are staying competitive in comparison to at least, well, some of the rest.
And then a squad that I think we didn't even really get to highlight at all here, Lace, but really showed up so far in the series is Virtus Pro. Tell me about them.
Yeah, I kind of feel like a little bit of a proud mama watching my boys grow up. But you know what? This team I've been watching for a little bit. It was really nice that they actually got picked up by an org. So you can know that their cohesion and everything that they're doing in this game is just being outstanding. To come actually, you know, be on the main stage and to land, but to watch these guys just actually pull it together. You know, as an Aussie, we kind of like love to yell at each other and a bit of banter, but like I said, their cohesion and playing today is exceptional.
And then let's talk about some of the squads that we are going to be looking to pick up that performance when we head into World's Edge as well, because there are some teams I think we saw go out a little bit earlier than maybe we would have liked. I know specifically for you, Zephyr, 2R1C.
Oh,
That had to sting a little.
it stings for me, especially as like the die-hard 2R1C fan, but optimally, especially for a lot of these teams in EMEA, that's one that had, especially towards the end of the split, really started to ramp and understand kind of this sense of macro that was super, super good. And while we don't see the further display kind of past the regionals, it just goes into this emphasis of you never know what to expect, especially once we get to the group stages here. Those that find their way into repetitive second, thirds, or fourths during a regular split are in a completely different world. I mean, talk about Aurora.
Absolutely. Well, let's start confirming some of these numbers here. We'll start things off by taking a look at those match results and see where everybody landed. You mentioned Aurora. 10 kills to their name for a 19-point second place finish, which is not too shabby when you look at where Reject Winity ends up at 20. So very, very top heavy here. But we also mentioned Liquid Alien, where all these squads having a really strong third match so far. But talk to me about some of these other teams on the first page here, Hot Take, that also still at least kept themselves in the running.
Yeah, one of the biggest standouts for me is LG. They dropped Zeus Cannon, which is really close to that ending. Granted, that zone, if I don't recall if they had a beacon or not, but anyone that hit that beacon and saw zone 2, their heart probably skipped a couple beats, because that was a horrible zone to have to guess on which side it's gonna end on, because if you're on the wrong side, you're just not gonna come out on top. LG did guess it right. They were, I believe, in a Stormcatcher, but I don't think I was surprised to see. I figured there was going to be more point production out of them, because it was a zone that they did have a little bit of priority to, and that they called right. So curious to see if they can kind of pick it up a little bit.
And as we take a look at the second page here as well, a couple squads struggling in this third match, still able to get some kills on the board there for Geared Gaming and Tom Young Kung, but we do see DZ in that 20th position, but they also had such stellar performances in some of the other matches, so they're still in a really solid spot right now, Lace.
Yeah, look, I was watching them, and it was kind of like we had a group of Australians versus C9 in that last sort of situation. But when you think Dark Zero is about to go down, they end up absolutely wiping and resetting. I have watched them, and they just reset like it's butter. So it was really good to see them sort of like perform in number 2. But you know what? Not a great game in match number 3 for them, but that's fine. They definitely pulled it together there. But also, you know, if we could touch on Serenity in our second match as well, they actually versed Tom Young Kung right at wall, right? So they actually had a bit of a rotate to make it to Beast. But the fact that C9 sort of solidified themselves inside the Beast to allow Serenity to take the height. Like the first thing we're taught about Apex is God spot, take the height. But, you know, C9 made an interesting choice, went into the Beast, and then made Serenity take the height, took the win.
Yeah, I'm excited when we get an opportunity to take a look back at that as well. Before we do that, let's take a look at the series results and see where everyone is kind of standing in that overall after our first 3 matches here for groups A and B. At the top of the table, it is Reject Winity at 27, followed very closely by lots of scary squads, Zephyr.
This is probably the most balanced that we have ever come into a third series here. The difference between, of course, the top and the bottom is literally just 9 points between that and first. That's not even something that I usually say a happy win. You don't need a happy win to even top out on the board right now. For the majority of these teams, we've seen some of their glorious and some of their failures in all 3 of our games. No one has particularly stood out among the rest yet.
And then when I'm taking a look at the second half of the series results here, Hot Six, something that's really jumping out at me is the fact that we've got the likes of Disguise, Tom Young Kung, with some serious KP on the board, just not able to nail down their placement points.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is actually like the way you want to look at some of those numbers sometimes is, again, you have to look at the zones that they had in front of